The Street Guardian, a story of hidden service. For 4 years, Linda Carter had been sweeping the same downtown streets, invisible to everyone who passed by. Just another city worker in orange coveralls, cleaning up after people who never noticed her. But when gunmen opened fire on Officer Martinez during a routine traffic stop, Linda's movements weren't those of a street cleaner. They were something else entirely. Welcome to Hidden Valor. Before we dive into this powerful story of redemption and protective instincts, tell me in the comments if you ever met a hero. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button. Every Guardian story matters. The intersection of 5th and Broadway had been Linda Carter's responsibility for 4 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Not that she was counting, except she was, because counting gave structure to days that might otherwise blur together in an endless cycle of sweeping, emptying trash cans and remaining invisible to the city that employed her. At 2:30 p.m. on a Wednesday in September, Linda pushed her cleaning cart along the sidewalk with the methodical rhythm of someone who'd perfected the part of efficient, unremarkable work. At 52, she wore her orange Department of Sanitation coveralls like armor, the bright color paradoxically making her invisible to the business people, tourists, and residents who moved through downtown Phoenix as if she were part of the street furniture, which was exactly how Linda preferred it. Her route took her past the same landmarks every day: the courthouse where lawyers in expensive suits discussed cases worth millions, the coffee shops where tech workers planned startups over lattes that cost more than Linda made in an hour, the bus stops where ordinary people waited to go home to ordinary lives. And every day at 2:45 p.m., she swept the area around the traffic control point where Officer Carlos Martinez directed the afternoon flow of vehicles with patience that Linda had come to respect. Martinez was a good cop. Linda could tell from the way he interacted with pedestrians, how he handled frustrated drivers, the courtesy he showed to everyone regardless of their apparent status. In 4 years of working this intersection, she'd watched him help elderly people cross busy streets, give directions to lost tourists, and deal with aggressive drivers without losing his temper. He was the kind of police officer Linda had once tried to be. Linda emptied the trash can near the bus stop, her movements automatic, while her mind wandered to the grocery list she was mentally compiling for dinner. Chicken, vegetables, maybe pasta. Simple food for a simple life that she'd built one day at a time after everything had fallen apart. She was reaching for a discarded coffee cup when the black sedan made its second pass around the block. Linda's hand froze halfway to the trash. 4 years of sweeping streets hadn't erased 15 years of police training, and something about the sedan's behavior triggered instincts she'd hoped were permanently buried. The car was moving too slowly for normal traffic. The windows were tinted beyond legal limits, and the driver had circled the block twice in the past 10 minutes. Most importantly, the sedan's occupants were focused on Officer Martinez. Linda's heart rate didn't increase. 4 years of civilian life hadn't completely erased her physiological conditioning, but her awareness sharpened to the hyper-alert state that had once kept her alive during patrol shifts in the city's most dangerous neighborhoods. The sedan pulled up to the curb 50 yards from where Martinez was directing traffic, positioning itself with clear sightlines to the intersection. Linda dropped the coffee cup back into the trash can and began moving her cart closer to the traffic control point, maintaining the appearance of routine work while positioning herself where she could observe both the sedan and Officer Martinez. At 2:47 p.m., the rear windows of the sedan rolled down. Linda saw the gun barrels before Martinez did. For 15 years, Linda Carter had been trained to protect and serve. For 4 years, she'd tried to forget that training. But as she watched armed men prepare to ambush a good police officer who was just doing his job, Linda discovered that some commitments transcend career changes. She began moving toward Martinez, her cleaning cart forgotten behind her. The first shots came at 2:48 p.m., shattering the afternoon quiet of downtown Phoenix with the distinctive crack of high-powered rifles. Officer Martinez spun toward the sound, his hand reaching for his service weapon, but the shooters had planned their ambush with professional precision. Martinez went down with the first volley, his body hitting the asphalt as civilians screamed and scattered in every direction. The sedan's occupants continued firing, their weapons aimed not just at the fallen officer, but at anyone who might attempt to help him. Linda Carter had been 30 feet away when the shooting started. By the time the echoes faded, she was kneeling beside Martinez, her body positioned between him and the gunman, while her hands assessed his injuries with the automatic competence of someone who'd done this before. Officer down," she whispered into Martinez's radio, her voice calm despite the tactical situation. Shots fired, 5th and Broadway. Need immediate backup and medical response. Martinez was conscious but bleeding heavily from wounds to his shoulder and leg. Serious but not immediately life-threatening if he received proper medical attention. The problem was that the gunmen were repositioning for a finishing assault, and Linda was the only thing standing between a good cop and execution. "Ma'am," Martinez gasped, trying to focus on the street cleaner who'd appeared beside him. "You need to get out of here. They're coming back." Linda looked at Martinez's service weapon, lying 3 feet away where it had fallen when he was hit. For 4 years, she hadn't touched a firearm. For 15 years before that, she'd carried one every day and hoped never to use it. "Officer Martinez," Linda said quietly, "I need you to trust me." She reached for his weapon. The moment Linda's fingers closed around the familiar weight of a police-issue Glock, 15 years of training flooded back with crystalline clarity. Muscle memory that had been dormant for 4 years suddenly reactivated, bringing with it the tactical awareness, threat assessment protocols, and combat reflexes that had once made her one of the department's most effective patrol officers. The sedan was making another pass, its occupants preparing for their final assault on the wounded officer. Linda could see 3 shooters, all armed with what appeared to be semi-automatic rifles, their positioning suggesting military-style training. Linda had dealt with military-trained criminals before. As the sedan approached the intersection, Linda rose from her position beside Martinez and stepped into the middle of the street. To the gunman, she must have looked like a middle-aged city worker who'd panicked and run into traffic. They probably thought she'd be easy to eliminate before finishing their primary target. They were about to learn the difference between a street cleaner and a street fighter. Linda's first shot shattered the sedan's front windshield, causing the driver to swerve and disrupting the shooter's planned approach. Her second shot disabled the front tire, sending the vehicle into a controlled spin that positioned the passenger side toward her, exactly where she wanted it. Her third, fourth, and fifth shots were placed with the surgical precision of someone who'd qualified expert marksman for 15 consecutive years. Not to kill, Linda had never wanted to take lives, but to disable threats with maximum effectiveness and minimum lethality. When the shooting stopped 30 seconds later, the sedan sat motionless in the intersection, its 3 occupants alive but no longer capable of threatening anyone. Linda had neutralized the threat using techniques she'd learned in police training, but adapted with the wisdom that came from understanding the difference between stopping criminals and destroying lives. Sirens were approaching from multiple directions as backup units responded to the officer down call. Linda secured the scene with the same methodical efficiency she'd once brought to patrol work, ensuring that the wounded suspects received medical attention while maintaining tactical control of the situation. Officer Martinez stared at her from his position on the asphalt, trying to reconcile the street cleaner who'd been invisible to him for 4 years with the tactical operator who'd just saved his life. "Ma'am," he said weakly, "who are you?" Linda looked down at the orange coveralls that had been her uniform for 4 years, then at the police weapon in her hands that felt as familiar as her own heartbeat. "I'm someone who used to do your job," she said quietly, "and someone who never forgot why it matters." The first backup unit arrived 67 seconds after Linda's last shot, followed quickly by paramedics, additional patrol cars, and the inevitable command structure that responded to officer-involved shootings. Linda found herself in the center of a crime scene that looked like a war zone but felt like coming home. "Ma'am, I need you to put the weapon down," called Sergeant Davis, the first supervisor on scene, his voice carrying the controlled authority of someone managing a complex tactical situation. Linda complied immediately, placing Martinez's service weapon on the ground and stepping back with her hands visible. Her movements were too smooth, too practiced for a civilian, and Davis noticed. "Ma'am, what's your name?" "Linda Carter, Department of Sanitation, assigned to this sector." Davis looked around the scene. 3 disabled gunmen receiving medical attention, a wounded police officer who was conscious and talking, and a city worker who'd somehow neutralized a professional ambush with tactical precision that would have impressed a SWAT team. "Ms. Carter, I need to ask about your background. That was some pretty advanced work." Linda was quiet for a moment, watching paramedics stabilize Officer Martinez while crime scene investigators began processing evidence. The familiar rhythm of post-incident protocols brought back memories she'd spent 4 years trying to suppress. "I was a police officer," she said finally. 15 years with Phoenix PD. I retired in 2019. Davis pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, I need a records check on Linda Carter, former Phoenix PD officer." While they waited for the background information, Detective Sarah Kim arrived to begin the preliminary investigation. Kim was a 20-year veteran who'd seen enough crime scenes to recognize when something didn't add up. "Ms. Carter," Detective Kim said, "can you walk me through what happened?" Linda's account was precise, factual, and delivered with the kind of clarity that Kim typically only heard from law enforcement professionals. No embellishment, no dramatic details, just a chronological sequence of events with exact times and tactical observations. "You said you observed the suspect vehicle making multiple passes before the shooting began. What made you suspicious?" "The timing was wrong for normal traffic patterns. The window tint exceeded legal limits. The occupants were conducting surveillance on Officer Martinez rather than paying attention to traffic flow." Kim exchanged glances with Sergeant Davis. These weren't observations that a city worker would typically make. "Ms. Carter, why didn't you call for backup when you identified the threat?" Linda's pause was almost imperceptible. "Because by the time I confirmed the threat, Officer Martinez was already down. Calling for backup wouldn't have prevented his execution." The word execution hung in the air with professional weight. This wasn't how civilians talked about violence. Davis's radio crackled with the record's response. Sergeant Davis, Linda Carter, badge number 4751, served Phoenix PD Patrol Division 2004 to 2019. Multiple commendations, spotless service record, early retirement, no disciplinary issues noted. Davis studied Linda's face, trying to reconcile the decorated police officer in the database with the street cleaner standing before him. "Ms. Carter, what aren't you telling us?" Linda looked around the crime scene, at officers she'd once worked alongside, at procedures she'd once helped implement, at a world she'd left behind for reasons that had nothing to do with her ability to do the job. "Detective Kim, the suspects who attacked Officer Martinez weren't random criminals. Their positioning, timing, and equipment suggest professional training. This was a targeted assassination attempt, not a robbery or gang shooting." Kim leaned forward. "What makes you think it was targeted?" "Because I've been working this intersection for 4 years, and I know Officer Martinez's routine. Anyone planning an ambush would know exactly when and where to find him." "Why would someone want to kill Officer Martinez?" Linda shrugged. "That's your job to figure out, Detective. Mine was just to keep him alive." As the investigation continued around them, Officer Martinez was loaded into an ambulance for transport to the hospital. Before the doors closed, he called out to Linda, "Ms. Carter, thank you. You saved my life." Linda nodded, but didn't respond. She was staring at the orange coveralls that had been her uniform for 4 years, at the intersection she'd cleaned every day, at the life she'd built after walking away from everything she'd once thought defined her. Detective Kim noticed her expression. "Ms. Carter, can I ask why you left the force?" Linda was quiet for a long time, watching the ambulance disappear into traffic carrying a good cop who would live to go home to his family, because she'd remembered how to be something she'd tried to forget. "Because I stopped believing that what we do makes a difference," Linda said finally. "But maybe I was wrong about that." 3 hours later, Linda sat in an interview room at Phoenix Police Headquarters, still wearing her orange sanitation coveralls but facing questions from people who'd once been her colleagues. The building smelled the same, sounded the same, carried the same weight of purpose and frustration that had defined her adult life until 4 years ago. Another time. Linda, said Captain Rebecca Morrison, settling into the chair across from her, I was your watch commander during your last 2 years on the force. I need to understand what happened today. Linda looked at Morrison, a woman she'd respected and worked for during some of the most difficult cases of her career. I saw a fellow officer in danger and responded according to my training. Your training from 4 years ago. Some training doesn't expire, Captain. Morrison opened a file that Linda recognized as her personnel record. Linda, your service record was exemplary. 15 years, multiple commendations, community policing awards, citations for bravery. You were being considered for promotion to detective when you submitted your retirement papers. I remember. What I don't remember is you ever explaining why you left. Your retirement request cited personal reasons and nothing else. Linda was quiet, studying her hands that had held a cleaning cart for 4 years and a service weapon for 15 years before that. Captain, does it matter why I left? What matters is that Officer Martinez is alive. Morrison leaned forward. Linda, it matters because what you did today was exceptional. Your tactical response, your precision under pressure, your ability to neutralize multiple armed suspects without killing anyone, that's not just good police work. That's extraordinary police work. Thank you. And it raises questions about why someone with your skills was sweeping streets instead of protecting people. Linda looked around the interview room where she'd once questioned suspects, conducted interviews, and processed cases that had shaped her understanding of human nature in all its forms. Captain, do you remember the Hernandez case? Morrison's expression shifted. The family that was killed during the home invasion. 2018, Maria Hernandez, 8 years old, her brother Diego, 6, their parents Elena and Carlos. Linda's voice remained steady. Morrison could see the weight that each name carried. I was first on scene. The family had called 911 when they heard someone breaking in, but dispatch was backed up and we didn't get the call for 7 minutes. When I arrived, they were all dead, Morrison remembered. It had been one of the most brutal crime scenes in the division's history. Linda, that wasn't your fault. The response time. 7 minutes, Linda interrupted. 7 minutes because we were understaffed, underfunded, and overwhelmed. 7 minutes too long for a family that trusted us to protect them. You caught the killers. I caught them 3 weeks later, after they'd killed 2 more families, after 8 more people died because our system failed. Linda stood up, walking to the window that looked out over the city she'd once sworn to serve and protect. Captain, I spent 15 years believing that what we do matters, that we make a difference, that families like the Hernandez family could count on us to be there when they needed us most. We do make a difference. Do we? Or do we just clean up the mess after people like Maria and Diego Hernandez are already dead? Morrison was quiet, understanding for the first time why one of her best officers had walked away at the height of her career. Linda, what you did today made a difference. Officer Martinez goes home to his family tonight because of you. One officer. One time. Because I happened to be in the right place. But you were there. You were ready. You remembered your training and used it to save a life. Linda turned back from the window. Captain, for 4 years I've been sweeping streets and emptying trash cans, and nobody died because I was too late. Nobody lived because you were there either. Nobody lived because I was there? Linda's voice carried a question she'd been avoiding for 4 years. Morrison stood up, moving to face Linda directly. Linda, in 15 years of police work, how many lives did you save? How many families didn't become the Hernandez family because you were there, because you were ready, because you cared enough to put yourself between danger and innocent people? Linda was quiet for a long time. I don't know, she said finally. I do. I've read your file, your commendations, the letters from families you helped, cases you solved, people you protected. You want to know why I was considering you for promotion to detective? Linda waited. Because you never forgot that our job isn't just about catching criminals. It's about protecting people. And today, when it mattered most, you protected someone. Morrison returned to her chair, pulling out another document. Linda, I'm offering you your badge back. Full reinstatement with credit for your previous service. We need officers who understand what you understand. Linda stared at the reinstatement paperwork, at the opportunity to return to a life she'd left behind for reasons that suddenly seemed less certain than they had 4 years ago. Captain, what about the Hernandez family? What about all the families you might save if you're here to protect them? That evening, Linda sat in her small apartment, still wearing the orange coveralls that had been her uniform for 4 years, holding the reinstatement paperwork that could make her a police officer again. The apartment was Spartan but comfortable, decorated with nothing that spoke of her previous career. No police memorabilia, no service photos, no reminders of the 15 years she'd spent wearing a badge. But on her kitchen table, next to Captain Morrison's offer, lay a newspaper with the headline, "City Worker Saves Police Officer in Downtown Shooting." The accompanying photo showed Linda standing over Officer Martinez, her body positioned protectively between him and the disabled sedan. Her phone had been ringing all evening, reporters wanting interviews, old colleagues reaching out, and community members who'd somehow gotten her number to thank her for what she'd done. Linda had declined all the interview requests, but the calls from former partners and supervisors were harder to ignore. At 8:30 p.m., her doorbell rang. Through the peephole, Linda saw a young woman in her 20s, holding flowers and accompanied by 2 small children. "Ms. Carter," the woman said when Linda opened the door. "My name is Sophia Martinez. Carlos is my husband." Linda stepped aside, inviting them in. The children, a boy about 8 and a girl about 6, stayed close to their mother but looked at Linda with the wide-eyed curiosity of kids who'd been told she was important. "Mrs. Martinez, how is your husband?" "He's going to be fine. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery." Sophia's voice carried the relief of someone who'd spent the day not knowing if her husband would come home. "We wanted to thank you." "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, we do." Sophia sat down on Linda's couch, gathering her children close. "Carlos told me what you did. He said you saved his life." Linda looked at the Martinez family, a young mother with 2 small children who still had their father, because she'd remembered how to be a police officer for 10 minutes. "Mrs. Martinez, your husband is a good cop. He deserves to go home safely." "All cops deserve to go home safely," Sophia said, "but not all of them have someone like you watching over them." The little girl, who'd been studying Linda carefully, spoke up. "Are you a police officer?" Linda looked at the child, thinking of Maria Hernandez, who would have been about the same age. "I used to be," Linda said. "Why aren't you anymore?" It was a simple question that Linda had been avoiding for 4 years. "Because I thought I couldn't help people the way they needed to be helped." "But you helped Daddy today." Linda nodded. "Yes, I did. So you can help people." Sophia smiled at her daughter's logic. Mia has a point. After the Martinez family left, Linda found herself looking at Captain Morrison's reinstatement offer with different eyes. For 4 years, she'd defined her failure as a police officer by the one family she couldn't save. But today, she'd been reminded of something she'd forgotten. Her success as a police officer had been measured by all the families she had saved. The next morning, Linda reported to work at the Department of Sanitation as usual, but instead of beginning her route, she asked her supervisor for a meeting. "Tom," she said, "I need to give you my 2 weeks' notice." Tom Rodriguez had been Linda's supervisor for 4 years, and he'd always wondered why someone with her competence and work ethic was content to sweep streets. "Linda, can I ask why? Are you taking another city job?" "I'm going back to my old job, Tom. I'm going to be a police officer again." Tom nodded slowly. "I saw the news yesterday. I figured this might be coming." "You're not surprised?" "Linda, in 4 years, you never once called in sick, never complained about overtime, never did anything less than excellent work. But you also never seemed like someone who was meant to be sweeping streets forever." "What did I seem like?" "Someone who was hiding from something important. And yesterday, you stopped hiding." That afternoon, Linda walked into Phoenix Police Headquarters wearing civilian clothes instead of orange coveralls, carrying Captain Morrison's paperwork instead of cleaning supplies. "Captain," she said, knocking on Morrison's door, "I'd like to accept your offer." Morrison looked up from her desk, smiling for the first time in days. "Welcome back, Officer Carter. There's one condition." "What's that?" "I want to work community policing, building relationships with families before they need protection, not just responding after they're in danger." Morrison nodded. "That can be arranged. Linda, can I ask what changed your mind?" Linda thought about the Martinez family, about Sophia's relief and Mia's simple logic, about the difference between one family she couldn't save and all the families she might still protect. "I remembered why I became a police officer in the first place," Linda said, "and I realized that sometimes the best way to honor the people you couldn't save is to keep saving the people you can." 6 months later, Officer Linda Carter walked her beat through the downtown Phoenix neighborhood that included 5th and Broadway, the intersection where her new life had begun. But now she wasn't pushing a cleaning cart, she was wearing a badge and building relationships with the community she'd once served invisibly. "Officer Carter," called Mrs. Kim, who owned the small grocery store on the corner. "How's Officer Martinez doing?" "He's doing well, Mrs. Kim, back on full duty, and his physical therapy is going great." Linda had developed a routine of checking in with the business owners, residents, and families in her patrol area, not responding to crimes, but preventing them through the kind of community engagement that built trust before emergencies happened. "Officer," a young boy called from the bus stop, "are you the lady who saved the police officer?" Linda knelt down to the boy's eye level. "I'm Officer Carter. What's your name?" "Miguel. My mom says you're a hero." "Your mom's very kind, Miguel." "But the real heroes are the people in this community who look out for each other every day." "Can I be a police officer when I grow up?" Linda smiled, thinking of all the reasons she'd once thought this job was too difficult, too heartbreaking, too impossible. "Miguel, if you want to help people and keep your community safe, then yes, you can be anything you want to be." At 2:45 p.m., Linda's radio crackled with a call that brought her full circle. "Unit 47, respond to 5th and Broadway for a traffic control request." Linda arrived at the intersection to find Officer Martinez directing traffic with the same patience and courtesy she'd observed for 4 years. When he saw her approaching, he smiled and waved. "Officer Carter, how's the community policing assignment working out?" "Better than I expected, Carlos." "How are you feeling?" "Good as new, thanks to you." Martinez paused in his traffic direction. "Linda, I never properly thanked you for what you did." "You don't need to thank me. We're supposed to look out for each other." "Is that why you came back?" Linda looked around the intersection where she'd swept streets for 4 years and saved a life 6 months ago, where she now worked to build the kind of community connections that made everyone safer. "I came back because I remembered that this job isn't about being perfect. It's about being present when people need you." Her radio buzzed with another call. "Unit 47, respond to domestic disturbance 1247 Oak Street. Family services requested." Linda keyed her radio. "Unit 47 responding." As she walked toward her patrol car, Martinez called after her. "Hey Linda, be careful out there." "Always am," she replied, but she was thinking about the family at 1247 Oak Street, about the difference between arriving too late and being there in time, about the choice she'd made to stop hiding from the job that defined her. The domestic disturbance call turned out to be a family in crisis: financial stress, communication breakdown, children caught in the middle of their parents' problems. But instead of just documenting the incident and leaving, Linda spent an hour connecting the family with resources: financial counseling, family therapy, community support programs. "Officer," the mother said as Linda prepared to leave, "thank you for taking the time to help us. Most cops just take reports and leave." "Mrs. Patterson, my job isn't just to respond to problems. It's to help prevent them from becoming tragedies." Driving back to the station at the end of her shift, Linda reflected on the path that had brought her from decorated police officer to invisible street cleaner to community policing officer. Each role had taught her something different about service, about protection, about the many ways people could take care of each other. Her phone buzzed with a text from Captain Morrison. "Linda, Family Services reports that your community policing approach has reduced domestic violence calls in your sector by 40%. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, Linda typed back. Just remembering why we became cops in the first place. Which was? Linda paused at a red light, looking around at the community she served, thinking about the families she protected through presence rather than response, about the children like Miguel who still believed that police officers were heroes. To make sure that everyone gets to go home safely, she typed, including us. 1 year after the shooting at 5th and Broadway, Linda Carter stood before a group of police academy recruits, teaching a course she'd never expected to be qualified to instruct: community policing and crisis prevention. Law enforcement, she told the class of future officers, isn't just about responding to crime. It's about building relationships that prevent crime from happening in the first place. Her students were eager young people who'd joined the academy to make a difference, to protect and serve their communities. Linda saw herself in their faces, the idealism, the commitment, the belief that they could make the world safer. Officer Carter, one student raised her hand. How do you balance enforcement with community building? Don't those approaches sometimes conflict? Linda smiled, remembering asking similar questions during her own academy training 20 years earlier. They don't conflict. They complement each other. Strong communities police themselves. When people trust you, they share information that prevents crimes. When children see you as a protector rather than an authority figure, they're more likely to ask for help before situations become dangerous. After class, Linda drove through her patrol sector, past the intersection where she'd spent 4 years sweeping streets and 1 day saving a life. The area had changed since she'd returned to police work. Crime rates down, community engagement up, families more connected to resources that helped them thrive rather than just survive. At 3 p.m., she stopped by the elementary school where she'd been invited to speak to Miguel's 3rd grade class about community safety. Officer Carter, Miguel called out when she entered the classroom, tell them about the day you saved Officer Martinez. Linda looked at the classroom full of 8-year-olds, thinking about how to explain the intersection of service and protection to children who should be able to take both for granted. Miguel, the most important thing about that day wasn't that I saved Officer Martinez. It was that our community came together to take care of each other. But you were brave. Everyone can be brave, Miguel. Being brave means helping when someone needs help, even if it's scary. After school, Linda met with Maria Santos, a social worker who'd become her partner in connecting families with resources before problems became crises. Linda, Maria said over coffee, the family we referred to counseling last month, the Pattersons, they're doing much better. The parents are communicating, the kids are thriving, and they've become advocates for other families in crisis. That's what community policing is supposed to look like. Prevention instead of reaction. Exactly. That evening, Linda returned to her apartment, which now displayed photos from both her careers, commendations from her police service alongside thank you cards from families she'd helped as a community officer. The walls told the story of someone who'd learned that protection comes in many forms. Her phone rang with a call from Officer Martinez. Linda, Sophia, and I wanted to invite you to dinner this weekend. The kids have been asking when Officer Linda is coming over again. I'd love to come, Carlos. How are things going? Good. Really good. The department is expanding the community policing program based on your success. They want to assign officers to every sector to build the kind of relationships you've built. That's wonderful news. Linda, can I ask you something? Do you ever regret leaving the force the first time? Linda considered the question, thinking about the 4 years she'd spent sweeping streets, the families she'd served invisibly, the path that had led her back to police work with a deeper understanding of what it meant to serve and protect. Carlos, I don't regret anything. Sometimes you have to step away from something to understand its true value. And what's the true value of being a police officer? Linda looked out her window at the community she served, at the families who trusted her to keep them safe, at the children who still believed that police officers were heroes because she'd learned to be worthy of that belief. The true value is being present when people need you, in whatever way they need you most. After the call ended, Linda reviewed the community policing reports that showed declining crime rates, increasing community trust, and families getting help before they reached crisis points. Each statistic represented people who were safer, children who were thriving, communities that were stronger. Some officers measured success in arrests made and crimes solved. Linda had learned to measure it in crises prevented and relationships built. Her phone buzzed with one final text of the day from a number she didn't recognize. "Officer Carter, this is Elena Patterson. I wanted you to know that my family is doing great, and my daughter says she wants to be a police officer like you when she grows up. Thank you for showing us that asking for help isn't giving up, it's getting stronger." Linda smiled, thinking about all the ways people could serve and protect each other, about the difference between reactive policing and preventive community building, about the journey that had taken her from officer to street cleaner to community guardian. She'd learned that protection wasn't just about wearing a badge or carrying a weapon. It was about building trust, creating connections, and being present in whatever capacity allowed you to keep people safe. Some guardians responded to emergencies, others prevented them from happening. Linda Carter had become both.